I should have known something was wrong the moment I opened my eyes. Not because it was my anniversary. Not because the sun was already pouring through the curtains, warm and golden, like nothing bad could ever happen. But because for once, I'd woken up feeling a broken bar hopeful. It was the kind of hope that comes after too many years of pretending you didn't care who you disappointed. The kind that makes you believe maybe just maybe love can be stronger than resentment. I rolled onto my side and found James already watching me. He looked tired, but when he smiled, it was soft and real. "Happy anniversary," he whispered, brushing my hair from my face. My throat tightened. "Happy anniversary," I managed to say. He kissed my forehead, then slipped out of bed. "Stay here," he called over his shoulder. "I'm making breakfast." I stayed, like he asked. While I lay in the quiet, I tried not to think about my parents. I tried not to remember the last words my mother had spat at me, all those months ago: "You'll get what you deserve someday. You think you're better than us? You're nothing without this little fantasy life." I'd promised myself I wouldn't let them ruin this day. But their voices clung to the edges of my mind like burrs. When James came back, carrying a tray with pancakes and a single white rose, I forced a smile. "Pancakes? You romantic." He gave a low laugh and set the tray in my lap. "Don't pretend you don't love them." I pressed my hand over his. "You make everything feel safe." He kissed me once, gently, before standing. "Finish eating. I'm going to check the mail. Your gift should be here." I didn't know then that the gift waiting on the porch wasn't from him at all. A few minutes later, I heard the door open again. But instead of the cheerful call I expected, there was silence. I set the tray aside and stood, wiping my hands on my robe. "James?" When I stepped into the hallway, he was standing just inside the door. There was a box at his feet. A plain cardboard box, sealed tight. And taped across the top, in thick black letters, was a tag: "That's what you deserve." My heart gave a single, hard thump. What a broken bar is that? James didn't answer right away. He crouched beside the box and laid his hand flat on the lid. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Then he turned to look at me, and his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. "Don't move," he said quietly. I let out a shaky laugh. "James, it's probably just a prank." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Number. Don't move." The air between us seemed to thicken. I felt my pulse in my throat, wild and panicked. Slowly, he ran his hand along the seam of the box. And when he lifted the corner flap, I saw it. A thin red wire. All the air went out of my lungs. "Get back," he said. I stumbled away, hands clamped over my mouth. A sour wave of nausea rose in my chest. He didn't touch it again. Instead, he pulled out his phone with hands that shook just once before he steadied them. 911, he said, voice low. "Yes, this is an emergency." Minutes stretched into hours. At least, that's how it felt. When the police arrived, they kept their distance, calling instructions through a bullhorn. James and I backed out onto the lawn, our bare feet in the grass. The neighbors gathered, watching from their porches with wide eyes. Some part of me wanted to scream that this wasn't our fault. That we hadn't done anything to deserve this spectacle. But I couldn't make a sound. I just clung to James's arm and stared at the box. The thing that might end everything. The thing someone had sent me, with a note as cold as a knife. That's what you deserve. The bomb squad came next. They moved around our living room in heavy suits, murmuring to each other. When one of them lifted the lid, I turned my face into James's shoulder. He rubbed my back in slow circles, whispering, "It's okay. We're okay." But I didn't believe him until a man in dark armor walked out and nodded. "It's not a bomb," he called over. "It's a replica. But you did the right thing. There were electrical components designed to look real." I almost collapsed. My legs wouldn't hold me, so I sank down on the grass. James knelt beside me, his arms around me. "That's what they wanted," I whispered. "To scare me." He didn't ask who. He already knew. One of the officers brought out a clear evidence bag. Inside was a letter. My name on the front in my mother's handwriting. I didn't want to take it. But the officer pressed it into my hands anyway. I unfolded it with numb fingers. "You think you can cut us out and pretend you're better? You can't. This is just the beginning. You don't deserve happiness. You deserve to remember where you came from." I couldn't read anymore. I let the paper flutter to the grass. Then I covered my face and cried until my ribs hurt. The police didn't leave right away. They had questions. So many questions. I sat on the couch, wrapped in the thin blanket one of the officers handed me, and tried to keep my hands from shaking. James did most of the talking. He explained about my family, how my parents had never accepted our marriage, how I hadn't spoken to them in nearly a year, how I'd received a threatening email just last week. The officer scribbled in his notepad, his face a practiced mask of concern. "Do you have the email?" he asked. I nodded and handed him my phone. He scrolled through it silently, then looked up at me. "Ma'am, is there any chance they would actually try to hurt you physically?" I thought of the box. The wire. The note. I swallowed. "I didn't think so," I whispered. He didn't say I was wrong. He didn't have to. When they finally left, I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. James locked every door, double-checked the windows, then sat down beside me and took my hand. "Talk to me," he said softly. I stared at the carpet. "They want me afraid," I said. "They want me to feel like I don't deserve this life." His fingers tightened around mine. "But you do." I looked at him. His face was so steady. So sure. And for the first time since I'd opened that door, something in me unclenched. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew this. I wasn't going to let them win. I didn't sleep that night. James drifted off around midnight, but I lay awake, listening to every creak of the house. Every whisper of wind against the window sounded like footsteps. At 3 in the morning, I slipped out of bed and crept into the kitchen. The letter was still on the counter where I'd left it. I picked it up again, forcing myself to read every line. When I was done, I felt something cold and clean inside me. A kind of clarity I hadn't known I was capable of. I picked up my phone. For a few seconds, my thumb hovered over the screen. Then I tapped the number I hadn't called in almost a year. It rang twice. Then my mother's voice, brittle and sharp, "Hello?" I almost hung up. But I didn't. "It's me," I said. There was a silence so long I wondered if she'd hung up too. Then she spoke. "So you got the package?" I closed my eyes. How could you do that? Her laugh was soft and mean. Oh, don't be dramatic. It wasn't real. My throat burned. It looked real. To the police. To us. Well, she sighed, maybe next time you'll think twice before turning your back on your family. I gripped the counter to steady myself. You're sick, I whispered. Her voice was calm, almost bored. You made your choice. Actions have consequences. And then she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand until the screen went black. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just set the phone down. And I knew, without a doubt, that if I didn't do something now, it would never end. The next morning, I called my sister. We hadn't spoken in months. She'd always been the good one, the one who never questioned my parents. But when she picked up, her voice was cautious. I heard about what happened, she said. Mom called me. I pressed my lips together. And? She said you were overreacting. That it was just a message. I closed my eyes. Anna. They sent me a fake bomb. There was a long pause. Then, finally, her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd go that far. I need your help, I said. She didn't answer right away. But when she spoke again, her voice was steady. Tell me what you need. That afternoon, I went to Anna's house. We sat at her kitchen table, sifting through boxes of old photos, letters, anything that showed what our childhood had been. The yelling. The manipulation. The way they'd always made me feel like I wasn't enough. Anna looked pale as she read some of the letters. God, she whispered. I forgot how bad it was. I shook my head. I didn't. When I left, I had a folder thick with evidence. Proof of the years they'd spent tearing me down. Proof that whatever they tried to tell people now, the truth was uglier than they'd ever admit. I didn't tell James everything I was planning. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed to do this on my own terms. So when I walked into my parents' house the next day, my heart hammering in my chest, I didn't let myself turn back. My mother looked up from her chair in the living room, surprise flickering across her face. I didn't expect you to come. I held up the folder. I'm here to give you a chance. She raised an eyebrow. A chance? To apologize. To admit what you did. She laughed. A low, ugly sound. Or what? I met her gaze without flinching. Or I make sure everyone knows. The neighbors. Your church. Your friends. Her smile faltered. I opened the folder and laid out a few of the letters. Then the email. Finally, the photo of the box with the tag. This is the last time you threaten me, I said. Her face went pale. You won't? I will, I said quietly. I'm done being afraid of you. She didn't say anything. Didn't reach for the papers. So I gathered them up again. And I walked out the door without looking back. I don't remember driving home. The whole way, my hands were cold on the wheel, and the houses blurred past like they weren't even real. All I could think was, I finally stood up to her. When I pulled into the driveway, James was waiting. He stepped out before I even turned off the engine, his face tight with worry. He opened my door and crouched beside me. Hey, he said softly. Talk to me. I tried. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Instead, I started to shake. Big, silent tremors that racked my shoulders and made my teeth clack together. James wrapped his arms around me, pressing his cheek to my hair. "It's okay," he murmured over and over. "You're safe." I didn't feel safe. I felt cracked open. Like the fear and rage I'd buried for years had finally boiled up where I couldn't hide it anymore. "I hate them," I whispered. The words felt foreign on my tongue. But also a broken bar, right? True. James didn't argue. He just held me tighter. And for the first time, I realized he'd been waiting up patient and steady for me to stop defending the people who hurt me. Later, after I'd showered and changed into clean clothes, I sat on the edge of the bed with a folder in my lap. I traced the edge of one of the letters with my fingertip. So many memories I never asked for. So many nights as a child, lying awake, wishing someone would come rescue me. But nobody had. And now I understood why, because my parents were very good at pretending. Pretending to be generous. Pretending to be loving. Pretending to be victims when it suited them. And I had played along, for years, because the alternative was admitting the truth. That they were never going to love me the way I needed. The thought hurt in a way I couldn't even name. But there was relief, too. A clean ache instead of a dirty, crawling fear. James came in and sat beside me. His hand covered mine. "What now?" he asked gently. I looked up at him. "I tell the truth," I said. "And I don't hide anymore." 2 days later, I made a post online. It wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. I wrote about the package. The note. The years of small humiliations, of being told I was worthless, ungrateful, selfish. I included photos of the letters. I didn't mention my parents by name, but anyone close to us would understand. When I hit publish, my hands were trembling. James was sitting across the table, watching me with quiet pride. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. "I am tired of pretending," I said. "I am tired of carrying their shame like it's mine." The post spread faster than I expected. Friends and distant relatives reached out, some with sympathy, some with shock. My phone lit up with message after message. Some said, "I'm so sorry you went through this." Others said, "I had no idea." One of my aunts called. She was crying. "I always wondered," she said, voice shaking. "I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know how to help you." I closed my eyes. Hearing that made me feel both seen and unbearably sad. "Thank you," I whispered. "For saying that." But not everyone was supportive. My parents posted their own version of events, painting themselves as the victims. They said I was unstable. That I was trying to destroy the family. For a moment, I felt that whole pull of the urge to defend myself, to explain. But then I realized, I didn't owe them any more of my life. I didn't owe them any more words. So I blocked their accounts. I turned off notifications. And I breathed. It was the first time in years that I felt free. The next week was quiet in a way that felt strange. Like the world had slowed down so I could finally catch up to myself. James and I spent a whole day cleaning the house. We threw out the old boxes of gifts my parents had sent over the years, the ones I'd kept out of guilt, even though they were always reminders of something ugly. When the trash was taken away, I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. The space felt a broken bar lighter. Like I'd finally carved out a place where I could just be myself. No expectations. No apologies. That evening, James lit candles and ordered takeout from the restaurant where we'd had our first date. We sat on the floor, eating noodles out of cardboard boxes. Halfway through, he set his food down and reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. My eyes stung. I didn't want to cry again. But his words felt like something breaking loose in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. I took a breath. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't catch in my throat. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, James brushed his fingertips across the scar on my wrist, a reminder of the years when my pain had nowhere to go but inward. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I knew what he meant. "You survived." I climbed under the blankets and closed my eyes. And as I drifted to sleep, I thought about how sometimes, the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But it doesn't mean their story has to be the end of yours. In the morning, the sun was bright through the curtains again. But this time, I didn't feel wary of it. I didn't feel like something bad was waiting to happen. I felt hopeful. And when James leaned over to kiss me, I let myself believe that maybe this was what I deserved all along: peace. Safety. Love that didn't come with conditions. As you finish reading my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be your worst enemy? If you have, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, sharing our stories is how we start to heal.